All right, stand by, everybody. All right, stand by. All right, yeah, this is Michael. Let's go. All right, all right, thanks. Hey, we're gonna play clip one again. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation of Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael M. Hotep. It is Tuesday, April 13th, 2021, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well. Okay, so we're broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and my YouTube channel, Michael M. Hotep, IMHOTEP. We're running into some technical difficulties. So today was day 12 in the DerekChauvin trial in the murder of George Floyd. We saw that the prosecution rested their case and the defense started presenting their case. Okay. In all, the prosecution has presented 38 witnesses. It's unclear how many witnesses the prosecution is going to present. Okay. I'm going to go back to clip one here in just a second, Shakita, to recap that from NBC Nightly News. So cue that back up, please. So the defense's argument largely fell apart today, and I'm going to let you hear some of the testimony today. The use of force expert that the defense presented, Barry Broad, on cross-examination had to walk back some of his claims. Now, he stated that the use of force against George Floyd was justified, and in his testimony, he really did not make any sense. Now, he's a paid witness, and I guess you could tell he's a paid witness from some of his testimony. But for him to first of all, he said that the use of force against George Floyd was justified. Um, he's Barry Broad of Bozeman, Montana, testified that the ex-Minneapolis police officer was "quote unquote" justified in his use of force and acted quote with objective reasonableness end quote. But he acknowledged under cross-examination that former officer DerekChauvin kept his knee in place while George Floyd was complying. Okay, how could the use of force be justified? How could the use of force be justified? And then Chauvin kept his knee in place while George Floyd was complying. If he's complying and you keep your knee in place and you keep your knee in place for 3 minutes after he's unconscious, then that use of force is not justified. So the defense fell apart right on the witness stand. Okay. I want to go back to clip one, Shakir. Let's go back to this clip here from NBC Nightly News.
Today, the murder trial of Derek Chauvin entered a new phase.
Your Honor, the state of Minnesota rests.
With the prosecution wrapping up, the defense took center stage, arguing that George Floyd died from drugs and pre-existing health conditions, not Chauvin's knee on his neck.
Put your hands on the desk.
The first witness, a retired Minneapolis officer who arrested Floyd during a previous incident in 2019, as shown in this body camera video.
The passenger was unresponsive and non-compliant to my commands.
But under cross-examination, he acknowledged Floyd eventually did comply. A paramedic then testified Floyd told her he'd taken multiple opioid pills that day.
I asked him why. He said it's because he was addicted.
The defense then shifted to the night of Floyd's death in 2020. Speaking publicly for the first time, Shawanda Hill, the woman in Floyd's SUV, told the jury he was asleep when the officers approached the vehicle.
I was like, baby, that's asleep. Open the door, roll down the window, whatever he told me to do. So he looked back and when he seen the man had the gun at the window when we looked back to him. So he instantly grabbed the wheel and he was like, please don't kill me. Please don't shoot me.
Also taking the stand, a Minneapolis Park police officer detained Hill while other officers restrained Floyd. The defense played video from his body camera and he testified about the crowd of bystanders.
Very aggressive. Aggressive towards officers, yes.
Then the defense called its own use of force expert.
I felt that Chauvin was justified and was acting with objective reasonableness.
The prosecution pushed back.
In this moment, was this crowd threatening crowd?
No.
The defense doesn't have to have a great case. The prosecution does, because the prosecution needs a unanimous verdict to convict, but the defense only needs one stubborn juror to lead to a hung jury.
Outside the courthouse, Floyd's family stood shoulder to shoulder with the family of Daunte Wright.
Police officers are killing us, and we are being murdered at a rate that I never thought I could imagine.
It is not clear exactly how many witnesses the defense will call, but the judge has told the jury that he expects closing arguments on Monday, Lester.
Okay, pause it right there. We're going to go to clip 2 here in just a second. Okay, so I watched a lot of the testimony today. And some of that stuff, with Eric Nelson, just some of the nonsense questions that he asked, I have to turn away and then go back and read the summary of it because, I only have so much tolerance for BS. And between George Floyd, this trial here and the killing of George Floyd, and then between the lieutenant who was threatened by the police there in that case in Windsor, I forgot the Virginia, and then with Daunte Wright, all this stuff this is hitting this is hitting all together at one time, and then we have now we're going to talk about this. Probably, let me see, let's look at this here. Because there's a developing story in Maryland. Because I follow all these news sources on Facebook also. Let's see. So ABC News is reporting Maryland state trooper fatally shoots 16-year-old after reports of an armed man. Maryland State Police are investigating a state trooper involved shooting in Leonard Town, Leonardt, Leonard Town, that ended in the death of a 16-year-old uniformed Maryland state trooper. Okay, just before 1:30 p.m. local time Tuesday, police received 2 separate 911 calls about a man acting suspicious while holding what looked like a gun. Police said in a statement Tuesday night. A uniformed Maryland state trooper then arrived at the scene and confronted a male teenager who has now been identified as Peyton Ham, H-A-M, P-E-Y-T-O-N. The teen was armed with what looked like a gun and a knife, police said. Okay, so you may hear more about this. I don't know the race of the person killed. He's 16. It could go either way, but I can guess. But so, all right. There's a, I get updates from media news outlets all throughout the day, even on Facebook, because I follow them on Facebook also. All right, but anyway, back to this story here. So the defense's argument fell apart today. Now, once again, you've heard me say time after time, okay, even though there were 38 witnesses the prosecution presented, you've heard me say before, this is the prosecution's case that we're seeing. Okay, we have not seen the defense present their case. Prior to the day, the defense has not called any witnesses of their own. The defense started presenting their case today, April 13th. All right. So use of force has been an issue. Now, this is a picture of Barry Broad, use of force expert. His testimony fell apart today. Okay. So whatever they paid him, it's okay to have a paid witness, but he didn't do them any justice. He didn't help them out today. All right. So use of force experts have clashed during the trial. I'm going to go to the live updates from the Washington Post. Then we're going to go to clip 2 here from the readout, Joanne Reed, Shakita. So let's look at this quickly here. Use of force experts clash in murder trial, right? One of the major questions at the heart of the Chauvin trial is, was the use of force exerted by the former police officer reasonable? Now, Barry Broad, whose picture we just showed, okay, he said that he's a use of force expert, former police officer. He testified that putting George Floyd in a prone position on the ground was justified and not necessarily a deadly use of force, contradicting numerous witnesses called by the prosecution, including other use of force experts. One of those use of force experts we heard from Monday, and if you watch Monday's show, we dealt with this testimony from Seth Stoughton, a law professor and former police officer and paid expert for the prosecution. Okay, a paid witness, when you have an expert witness, that's common. Okay, Sergeant Jody Steiger from the Los Angeles Police Department, African-American male sergeant who testified last week, he was a paid witness. He was paid $10,000. Having expert paid witnesses is common in court. Okay, but you want to get your money's worth. I don't think they got it from Mr. Broad. Okay, I could be wrong, but I don't think they got it from him. Now, Seth Stoughton on Monday argued that Derek Chauvin should have identified that the force could have led to George Floyd's medical distress. He said no reasonable officer would have believed that that was an appropriate, acceptable, or reasonable use of force. Seth Stoughton said no reasonable officer would have believed that that was an appropriate, acceptable, or reasonable use of force. Okay, but that's not what old Barry said. Okay, now I'm gonna put Barry's picture back up here because I don't want you to be confused here. Okay, so this is Barry Broad. He disagreed. He said it was a reasonable use of force. He said Derek Chauvin was justified. Okay, but in cross-examination, his argument fell apart. Okay, so once again, the prosecution is doing an excellent job, but also you're in Minnesota, so who knows what's going to happen? Okay, because Philando Castile, that trial happened in Minnesota as well, and we saw what happened there. Officer Yanez was acquitted. Okay, now let's go back to this here. So the differing opinions are partly due to the various factors experts weigh when determining whether the use of force is justified, according to police trainer and former detective Kevin R. Davis. All right, now the defense expert admits George Floyd was complying while Chauvin restrained him also. Okay, so under cross-examination, Barry's argument falls apart. Okay, under cross-examination, Barry's argument falls apart. Barry Broad, the use of force expert for the defense, acknowledged during cross-examination that George Floyd was no longer resisting and was complying with police while Chauvin's knee remained on his neck. So the question that I would ask Barry, use of force expert, hopefully it's okay for me to call you Barry, the question I would ask you is, okay, so when George Floyd is laying there not moving for 3 minutes, is it okay for Chauvin to keep his knee on his neck? Remember, it was 91.5 pounds coming down on George Floyd's neck. Okay, remember Martin Tobin, the pulmonologist, we covered all that here on this show. He put up a chart and he talked about how there was 91.5 pounds coming down on George Floyd's neck. Okay, so when George Floyd is not moving, he's not resisting. Is that an adequate use of force? Okay, is that acceptable? Let me bring this chart back up here to refresh your memory in case maybe you didn't see it or something like that, or you're watching the Golden Girls or something. I don't know. Real Housewives of Atlanta. Shout out to Kenya Moore. This right here, this chart here, this is Dr. Martin Tobin. He showed this chart when he testified. Okay. Last week, Thursday, I think it was. April 8th. Okay. He testified on April 8th. Yeah, Thursday. All right. I want to go to clip 2, Shakita. This is from the Readout, Joanne Reed, MSNBC. And she's talking to 2 attorneys. And Katie Fang, one of the attorneys she's speaking with, says the defense failed today in the Chauvin trial. And she's correct. The defense did fall. The defense did fail. Let's go to this clip, Shakita.
Make the case that George Floyd's death was caused by his drug use. You would think that during his 2019 arrest, where he allegedly consumed controlled substances, he would have presented at least some of the same medical symptoms that he did under Chauvin's knee.
You indicated that his respiratory effort was normal, correct?
Correct.
He was not in respiratory distress, correct?
No.
His blood oxygen level was normal, right?
Correct.
His pulse was normal, correct?
Yes.
His heart rhythm was regular or normal, right?
Correct.
He didn't stop breathing.
No.
His heart didn't stop.
No.
He didn't go into cardiac arrest.
No.
Back with me are Katie Fang and Joyce Fan. So let's go through it. I want to start. This is cut 2 for my producers. Let's start with Barry Broad, who was one of the experts that was called by the defense. He actually is an expert witness who's, you might not remember him, but you'll remember the case that he most famously testified in. This was the Laquan McDonald killing in Chicago, in which he testified that it was a legitimate use of force to shoot Laquan McDonald 16 times. Officer Van Dyke in that case was convicted of second-degree murder and aggravated battery. He shot a man who was running away 16 times. Barry Broad thought that was a perfectly fine use of force. Here's Barry Broad attempting to explain how keeping George Floyd in his prone position with 91 pounds of downward force on him was not use of force at all because it doesn't hurt at all.
The maintaining of the prone control to me is not a use of force.
Why is it not a use of force?
Because it's a control technique. With that, it doesn't hurt.
I need to ask you if you believe that it is unlikely that orienting yourself on top of a person on the pavement with both legs is unlikely to produce pain?
It could.
If this act that we're looking at here in Exhibit 17 could produce pain, would you agree that what we're seeing here is a use of force?
Shown in this picture, that could be a use of force.
Okay,
So,
Katie, you're here
so
to explain the defense
pause it right there, Shakita.
What?
Pause it right there. Just back it up 20 seconds. So they show. Shakita, pause it right there and back it up about 20 seconds. Okay. So they showed him a picture of Chauvin with his knee on his neck, right? And we showed him a picture of Chauvin with his knee on George Floyd's neck, like this picture right here. And he had to admit, okay, that could be a use of force. What the hell you mean could be? Give me an example when it's not a use of force. So, but this is who they could get. So, but his testimony under cross-examination fell apart today. All right, let's go back to the clip.
Side of this, what?
Yeah, no. I mean, the defense failed today. Broad was unlikable. I don't know why the defense put him on, other than maybe they couldn't find anyone else that would come and testify as an expert on behalf of DerekChauvin at this trial. He clearly failed at the Laquan McDonald trial. So, I mean, I don't know if his track record was so good. what was really critical about this expert today, Joy, is that he was trying desperately to show in a very clinical way that use of force has to be done, compliant with police procedures, et cetera. The problem is the defense must assume that the jury's not paying attention, because we heard from the actual guy, Lieutenant Mercel from the Minnesota Police Department, who testified for the prosecution, who said that restraint technique that DerekChauvin used is not taught by the Minnesota PD. So we already have the person who's actually in charge of everything, including the chief of police, saying, we don't condone this, we don't authorize this. And the other critical mistake that was made today by the defense was through this guy, Barry Broad. Broad says, you know what, you have to look at what the reasonable officer was doing, meaning we need to put the jury in the shoes of this officer, so this officer can the jury can feel whether or not and determine whether or not this officer acted reasonably or objectively. Here's the problem, and Joyce would agree with me. As lawyers, is something called the golden rule. You are not allowed to ask the members of the jury to put themselves in the shoes of the party. That's a mistrial, right? So what's critically wrong with this argument that they're doing? If you ask the jurors, any of these 12 jurors, to put themselves in the shoes of DerekChauvin, none of them are ever going to say that what that cop did was reasonable, objectively, subjectively wasn't reasonable. So that was a major mistake, because none of those jurors are going to say that 9 minutes and 29 seconds on somebody without a pulse is something they would ever do, right, as a reasonable officer.
Okay. Pause it right there. All right. So that's from the readout. Very good analysis from Katie Fang and Joyce Vance as well. We're going to go to this next story dealing with Daunte Wright in just a minute here, but I want to finish up here. So once again, it didn't go too well today for the prosecution. Now, Barry Broad, a former police officer and law enforcement consultant, affirmed after questioning by prosecutor Stephen Schleicher that a, quote, reasonable police officer, end quote, in Chauvin's position on top of Floyd would know that Floyd was not resisting, would know that Floyd was not resisting, okay? He agreed an officer's use of force must be reasonable from start to finish. So he contradicted himself under cross-examination. Let's flip back over to this, okay. Now, he agreed an officer's use of force must be reasonable from start to finish. Now, prosecutor Steve Schleicher also noted comments on George Floyd's condition from other officers and bystanders. For instance, a colleague saying at one point that George Floyd did not have a pulse. Quote, all of this would have been known to a reasonable officer in the defendant's position, correct? Barry Broad was forced to say yes. Now, earlier in the cross-examination, Barry Broad testified that a, quote, perfectly compliant, end quote, suspect would have been resting comfortably on the pavement during an arrest. Okay, prosecutor Steve Schleicher questioned that phrasing, to which Broad clarified, I was describing what the signs of a perfectly compliant person should be. So prosecutor Schleicher responded, he said, so attempting to breathe while restrained is being slightly non-compliant. So attempting to breathe while restrained is being slightly compliant. Okay, Barry Broad was forced to respond, no. So check this out from the Washington Post. And also under cross-examination, defense expert witness acknowledges DerekChauvin's knee hold, quote, could be considered use of force as well. We talked about that also. Okay, so check that out. The prosecution, once again, did an excellent job. So shown the infamous photo of the moment, Barry Broad clashed with prosecutor Steve Schleicher. The prosecutor about whether DerekChauvin, quote, was on top of George Floyd, but later said that he was but later said that he was, and that the position could cause pain. He had to admit it could cause pain, which he considered a factor in determining whether the action was use of force. Barry Broad said, in this picture, that could be a use of force. Okay, so it didn't go too well for the defense today. Let's see here. Okay, we've got all that. Oh, then he walked into some territory that was already covered. Of course, it was covered last week expertly by Dr. Martin Tobin. Okay, and I had to go back into my notes and pull out the testimony from Dr. Martin Tobin back from Thursday, April 8th. But Barry Broad testified today that George Floyd saying, "I can't breathe," was evidence that he was breathing. But we heard from pulmonologist, breathing expert Martin Tobin, that does not necessarily mean somebody is breathing correctly. We heard from other expert witnesses as well last week that just because somebody is talking does not mean that they are breathing correctly. Okay, but see, once again, this sounds like that old school law enforcement thinking that Barry Broad testified to today. Okay, Broad testified Tuesday that he thought George Floyd could breathe when he said, quote, "I can't breathe," adding that the suggestion that he couldn't breathe is, quote, "a common misunderstanding in the policing community." This is what he testified to. Is wrong. And you had doctors that contradicted that last week. Barry Broad, a use of force expert from Bozeman, Montana, and a paid witness by the defense, I'd like to know how much they're paying him, said his training has taught him that it is a reasonable assumption that someone can breathe if they are talking, even if they say they can't breathe. Now, George Floyd said he couldn't breathe 27 times. Okay? He testified, if somebody's saying they can't breathe, and it appears to me they're taking full breaths and they're shouting, then to me, the layperson, they can breathe. At multiple points during his testimony, Barry Broad described DerekChauvin's use of force against Floyd as objectively reasonable, end quote. So we already dealt with that. Now, if we go back to Martin Tobin, I'm looking back at the New York Times key moments from day 10 in the trial. And this is from April 9th. Okay. If we go back and look at his testimony, if we look at, okay, let's takeaways, and we look at, let's see if we can bring this up here. All right. We go back and look at page. We'll look at page 4. And I'm going to see if I can bring this up here also. We want to look at key moments in day 10. Takeaways. Let's see if we can pull this up quickly. I want to show you this here. You know what? Let's do this. Let's go. I'm going to go to clip 3. I'm going to go to clip 3 and we'll come back to this to squeeze this in. Okay, so with Daunte Wright, we know we found out today the officer Kim Potter, who shot and killed Daunte Wright, she resigned today, as well as the police chief. So you have some chaos going on. We know protests are continuing for a third night in Brooks Center, Minneapolis also. Let's go to this clip here. We're going to go to clip number 3. Shakita dealing with Daunte Wright. This is from the readout. They murdered my nephew. the George Floyd and Daunte Wright families hold a joint news conference. Let's go to this clip.
The family held a press conference with attorney Ben Crump. Wright's grieving mother described the moment she called to see if he was okay, only to find out he'd been fatally shot.
I never imagined this is what was going to happen. I just thought maybe he was being arrested. And then when I called back, the girl who said he had in the car answered the phone, and it was on a FaceTime. And she said, she was crying and screaming, and she said that they shot him. And she pointed the phone towards the driver's seat, and my son was laying there, unresponsive. That was the last time that I seen my son. That's the last time I heard from my son, and I have had no explanation since then.
Daunte Wright's aunt expressed outrage over the loss of her nephew, who left behind a 1-year-old child.
They murdered my nephew. She killed my nephew. My nephew was 20. Did y'all not see my little great nephew? Did y'all not see that beautiful baby? He is fatherless. Not over a mistake, over murder.
Daunte's aunt also said her nephew had a personal connection to George Floyd.
And the craziest thing is to find out today that my family has connection to this man, to this family. His girlfriend was a teacher for my nephew.
My Lord.
The officer who shot and killed Daunte Wright is Kimberly Potter, a 26-year-old veteran of the Brooklyn Center Police Department who had also served as president of the police union. Yesterday and again this morning, Brooklyn Center Mayor Mike Elliott made clear that Potter should be fired, and he had the power to do so. That's because the city council granted the mayor command authority over the agency last night. They even recommended that Officer Potter be fired. Instead, we learned from Mayor Elliott in a chaotic press conference today that Potter had resigned, a move that could preserve her pension. But the mayor seemed unclear of the implications of that resignation, which is a distinctly different thing than being fired.
Since Officer Potter was allowed to resign, is she allowed to keep her pension and can she join another police department?
I do not have the answer to that.
Did the city ask her to resign?
We did not ask her to resign. That was a decision she made.
When did she make this decision, and did she get wind that you were planning to terminate her?
I do not know if she got wind of an impending termination or not.
Mayor Elliott later clarified that he had not necessarily accepted her resignation. But the problem is, it's not uncommon for bad officers to resign, keep their pensions, and move from one police department to another. That's what happened with the Ohio police officer who resigned from his position under scrutiny of his competence, and then moved on to Cleveland, where he wound up leaping from a police cruiser and gunning down 12-year-old Tamir Rice back in 2014. As a former president of the police union, Kimberly Potter would certainly know whether resigning would help preserve her future job prospects. Multiple outlets had also pointed out that Potter played a role in advising officers who were involved in shooting and killing another Black victim in 2019. Potter was first at the scene where she instructed the two officers responsible.
Hey, pause right there, Shakita. We're out of time here. Pause right there. Pause it right there, Shakita. Okay, all right. We're out of time here on 910 a.m. the Superstation. Those watching on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, and my YouTube channel, Michael M. Hotep, we'll keep going for a few more minutes. Remember, right now it's correct. Wrong behavior is not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace. Okay, stand by. Stand by, everybody. We'll go back to this clip here. We'll finish this, and then we'll go to this next story dealing with how people, 1/3 of people surveyed said they watch less sports because of social that was taking place during the sports games. Okay. Yeah, 1/3 of Americans watching fewer sports due to racial justice messaging. Okay, I want to cue this clip back up that we were just listening to. We'll go back to this. Everybody stand by. Share this broadcast on social media platforms. Also, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network. You can support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. Okay, we're here 6 days a week. This helps us to keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, pay some of the bills, etc. All right. And then we have a new session of my online class, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is, we have a new session starting up Saturday, April 17th, 2021, 12 noon to 2 p.m., 12 noon to 2 p.m., okay? And you can email me with questions about that, and we can get you registered at ahnshow@africanhistorynetwork.com, ahnshow@africanhistorynetwork.com. It's a 9-week, 18-hour online course. We deal with thousands of years of history and what led up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. I do an online, we do a PowerPoint presentation. We have video clips, book references, etc. So it's a ton of information. I'm going to post a link here. We're wrapping up the Tuesday class of this course, but I'm going to post the information here, and this has the link to the Tuesday class. You can go ahead and register. If you register for the Tuesday class, we'll just automatically enroll you in the Saturday class. But all the sessions are archived also. We do the class live, and the class is recorded. You can go back and watch it over and over again. Okay, so you have full access even after the class is over. You have full access. We just posted the link here. All right, I want to go back to this. Clip here. This is dealing with what's going on in Minnesota. This is what's going on in Minnesota here, dealing with Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. Dealing with the killing of Daunte Wright. Let's go back to this clip.
Year-old Tamir Rice back in 2014. And as a former president of the police union, Kimberly Potter would certainly know a police officer who resigned from his position. Mayor Elliott later clarified that he had not necessarily accepted her resignation. But the problem is, it's not uncommon for bad officers to resign, keep their pensions, and move from one police department to another. That's what happened with the Ohio police officer who resigned from his position under scrutiny of his competence, and then moved on to Cleveland, where he wound up leaping from a police cruiser and gunning down 12-year-old Tamir Rice back in 2014. And as a former president of the police union, Kimberly Potter would certainly know whether resigning would help preserve her future job prospects. Multiple outlets have also pointed out that Potter played a role in advising officers who were involved in shooting and killing another Black victim in 2019. Potter was first at the scene, where she instructed the two officers responsible for shooting and killing the man who was on the autism spectrum to get into separate squad cars, turn off their body-worn cameras, and to not talk to each other, according to the investigative report. On top of Potter's resignation today, the Brooklyn Center police chief also resigned, just a day after he characterized the Wright shooting as an accident. He said Potter had confused the holster containing her taser with the one holding her firearm. Never mind that there's a dramatic difference in weight between a plastic taser and a deadly weapon. And that because of where the holsters are placed in that department, it was a simple question of knowing your left hand from your right hand. Now the New York Times is reporting that it was a more common problem among police than we necessarily knew, with at least 12 documented incidents since 2001. Unfortunately, in severe cases, the officers did not serve much jail time, or any. Joining me now from Ron Allen. Ron, give us a sense of the situation there. I can see crowds massed behind you.
Yeah, Joy, the battle lines are drawn. Again, yes, there's a crowd back there. They've been gathering for the last hour or so. Protests, the curfew is still several hours away here. And over on this other side here, in front of police headquarters, you can see that the National Guard are here backing up and reinforcing the police department. So we've been seeing them bring in reinforcements all afternoon. So there's still a lot of anger. There's still a lot of frustration. There's still a lot of outrage out here. Yes, it was positive that many of the protesters will tell you that the officer resigned, the police chief resigned, but they want to see her prosecuted. And we've been hearing from local prosecutors that a decision about that may come as soon as tomorrow. They're reviewing the case, but it's another example, perhaps, of how authorities here are trying to move quickly, trying to be transparent about what they're doing to try and bring calm to the city. Also tonight, it'll be interesting to see how aggressive the police are if they choose to disperse the crowds. The city council here yesterday passed a resolution banning the use of tear gas and other chemical agents, and also banning, trying to basically make the situation here less hostile. But again, now we see officers, police, National Guards, and military fatigues. So again, there is an air of the military here, which is the thing that a lot of protesters are complaining about. And you heard the families today, George Floyd's relatives, Daunte Wright's family. You saw the grief and the pain. They're trying to support each other. We had an interesting chat this afternoon with China Whitaker, who is the mother of Wright's little boy, whose name is Daunte as well. Cute little boy who's 1, he'll be 2 in July. And, you know, to hear her talk about how this little boy will have to grow up without a father, and how Daunte, she says, was such a role model. He was a hardworking, doting father who was very present in his son's life. Just a very emotional conversation we had with her that really drove home, you know, protesters are one thing and police and all that are another thing. But when you get down to just the families and the individuals who are devastated by what has happened here and how their lives have been changed forever, it's just very moving to see. But the bottom line is, people here are hoping for some progress. They want to see this woman prosecuted. They want to see justice. You know, so many people have said, you know, there wasn't due process for Daunte, so there shouldn't be this slow process for this officer as well. They want to see justice happen quickly, and they're going to be out here again tonight. We'll see what happens when curfew comes, whether the police let this go or whether they, as they did last night, disperse the crowd, tear gas, rubber bullets, and move people out of here.
Okay.
Attorney Mosby, you know, it is, as I said.
Okay. All right. That's from, that is from the readout with Joanne Reed. Okay, here we go. That's from the readout with Joanne Reed. So we know the protest continued into tonight. So we'll see what happens. Third night of protest there in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. All right. There's an article from the New York Times. We'll probably talk about this some more tomorrow because we ran out of time here. This deals with how could an officer confuse a gun for a taser? How could an officer mistake a gun for a taser? They document 12 cases where this has happened. We know it happened with Oscar Grant as well. Now, as the police chief said on Monday in the press conference, okay, and that was Police Chief Gannon. As Police Chief Gannon said Monday in the press conference, they in that police department, but also in many police departments, they train with the taser on the weak side of your body and your handgun on the dominant side of your body, meaning that if you're left-handed, then your taser, if you're right-handed, 85% of Americans are right-handed, your gun is going to be on your right side of your body and your taser is going to be on the left side of the body. Okay, usually with police officers, you usually don't see them with the taser and gun on the same side of the body. It does happen. I've seen it happen. But even then, usually the gun and taser are not the same color. Usually the tasers are yellow. Okay, the majority of tasers I've seen are yellow. I've seen some black, but the majority of them are yellow. They feel different. The weight is different. But the biggest thing is that it's a different color. So when I was watching the video of the attempted arrest of Daunte Wright, and you hear Officer Kim Potter say taser, taser, taser. She has her gun out. She's pointing her gun. You see her gun in her own body camera footage. You see her gun. The gun is black. And she's saying taser, taser, taser. She has her gun out for a few seconds and then she shoots him. Okay, so that doesn't make sense to me. If it, you know, if it does, it just doesn't make sense. All right. If she had been on the force 1 or 2 years and maybe she didn't have the gun out for that number of seconds and said taser and then fired, possibly. But for this scenario, 26 years on the force, and we can see on the body cam, we can see the gun, doesn't make sense. So, but read this article here from New York Times. How could an officer mistake a gun for a taser? Okay, so the chief of police for Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, where Daunte Wright was fatally shot by a white officer, said on Monday, April 12th, that the shooting was an accident. The officer, Kimberly A. Potter, a 26-year veteran of the force, had intended to deploy her taser, the chief said at a news conference, but had shot her service pistol instead. Now, tasers look and feel different from pistols, okay? Tasers look and feel different from pistols in a number of ways, and most police forces, including Brooklyn Centers, have standard precautions and protocols in place to prevent the sort of mix-up that can be deadly. Typical police service weapons, the exact models of the pistol and taser carried by the officer who fatally shot Daunte Wright, are not known, but the police commonly use the pistol and taser shown here, weapons that differ not only in appearance but size and grip. Okay, now this is a Glock 17 semi-automatic pistol. Okay, the color is different. That's the first thing. One of these things is not like the other. Can you guess which thing doesn't belong? You know, like Sesame Street. Okay, one of these things is not like the other. The grip, the feel, the weight, the color, all that's different. All right. Bright colors are often used to distinguish electrical shock weapons that fire projectiles. Now, tasers are often produced in bright colors or with neon accents to distinguish them from pistols. The Brooklyn Center Department Manual cites the Glock 17, 19, and 26 as standard issue for the department. All three pistols weigh significantly more than a typical taser. Glocks also have a trigger safety that can be felt when touching the trigger. Okay, I think they refer to the trigger guard. Okay, I think they refer to the trigger guard. But yeah, the trigger guard on the Glock is entirely different than the trigger guard here on the taser. It's just I don't understand this. Okay. Glocks have a trigger safety that can be felt when touching the trigger. Tasers do not. Okay. So maybe referring to something different than the trigger guard. But if you just look at the trigger guard here on the Glock, which surrounds the trigger, right? And when you go through training, they usually tell you don't put your finger on the trigger unless you're getting ready to pull it. But but that trigger guard is entirely different than this one here. Okay. So as they're referring right here, I'm sorry, to the trigger safety, yeah. That must be depressed when the trigger is pulled. Glock 17s typically have a trigger safety that must be depressed when the trigger is pulled. Okay. So but even the trigger guard is different. that surrounds the trigger. The trigger guard is even different than here on the taser. Now, grips on tasers are typically different from those on firearms as well, though they may feel familiar because both are usually made of a similar type of polymer. All right. So read the rest of this here from I think they go through and cite some cases. Brooklyn manual states, okay. Yeah, they go through and cite some cases. There have been other instances of a police officer intending to deploy a taser and discharging a firearm instead. Though such errors are not common, that's true, they're not common. In Oklahoma, in 2015, a reserve deputy killed an unarmed man when he mistook his handgun for a stun gun. I remember that case. I remember Oscar Grant. Now, a lot of these cases, we're the ones that end up getting killed. I don't know exactly how many of these cases it was African Americans who were. Oh, let me put this in the full back up. I don't remember how many cases it was African Americans who were the victims, but I do know that I do know in some of these specific cases that I remember, I do know we were the ones that got shot. I do know that. Okay. So let me expand that. All right. So right here, that's the trigger safety right there on the Glock 17. Yeah, so I remember Oscar Grant. I remember in Oklahoma. Now, also, let's see, Greg Meyer, a retired captain in the Los Angeles Police Department and a use of force expert, documented 9 similar instances from 2001 to 2009 in a 2012 article published in a monthly law journal produced by Americans for Effective Law Enforcement, a nonprofit organization. In 6 of the 9 cases cited in the article, the officers carried both weapons on the same strong hand side of their bodies, meaning that if they were right-handed, they carried both weapons on their right side of the body, which is not advisable. Police departments train with the taser on the opposite side of the body for a good reason. It cuts down on mistakes like this happening. Okay. Now, in the other 3, however, the officers carried the weapons on opposite hips with the taser position so that they could cross draw it. The article says so they could cross draw with their dominant hand. If you have it positioned so you have to draw, if you're right-handed and you have a position where you have to draw with your left hand, it also keeps mistakes from happening. Now, in most cases, there has been little or no jail time for officers disciplined or tried for wounding or killing someone in situations in which they say they have mistaken a gun for a taser. In the Pennsylvania case, for example, the district attorney said the officer violated a policy requiring officers to wear their tasers on the side opposite their firearms. Still, he said the officer, quote, did not possess the criminal mental state required to be guilty of a crime under state law, end quote. One of the most widely known cases happened in 2009 in Oakland, California, when a white Bay Area transit officer shot and killed an unarmed African-American man at the Fruitvale station of the city's BART line. The man, Oscar Grant III, was lying face down when the officer shot him. The officer who killed Oscar Grant later contended that he had meant to pull his taser, but had pulled his firearm instead. He was found not guilty on charges of second-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, and convicted on involuntary manslaughter. He served 11 months in prison. Daunte Wright is another Oscar Grant and uncle of Oscar Grant, Cephas Johnson, tweeted on Monday, quote, "We've seen this before and know exactly how it will play out," end quote. All right. So check out this piece here from the New York Times. How could an officer mistake a gun for a taser, by Sean Hubler and Jeremy White, from April 13th, 2021. Okay. I want to go to, let me see. Hold on. I think we got through all this here. We got through as much as I want to get to. Read the article also from the NBC News. Officer who fatally shot Daunte Wright, police chief, resigned in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. We did a summary of that as well. So read the details on this. You're going to hear more about this. And this is taking place about 10 to 12 miles away from Minneapolis, Minnesota. All right, I want to go to this next story here. And I saw this story at the end of March, but I did not get a chance to talk about it. This kind of ties into the topic here. 1/3 of Americans watching fewer sports due to racial justice messaging. 1/3 of Americans watching fewer sports due to racial justice messaging. Okay. And let me do this. We had a comedy break last night, and I was looking for another clip today. And how's everybody doing on YouTube as well? I think we're going to take another comedy break here. I was looking for where's my Red Fox? Which clip was I looking at? We had that one. We had, okay, yeah, this is the one I want. Okay. Red Fox appearing on the Flip Wilson show. This is from February 28th, 1974. Just to lighten some things up here, because I got to deal with this stuff all day. All these news stories, things like this. And then I have to go through and edit the video and go through all this stuff all over again. Okay, let's see here. Let's see. Let's back this up. February 28th, 1974, the end of Black History Month. 1974. This is Red Fox returning back to the Flip Wilson show.
Thank you very much for your applause. And a lot of you never saw me before in person, maybe just from television, but you're going to love me. And that was December of 1922. I might look older, but it was 1922. Oh, you can look better than I do. Okay, I know if you look in the face, your heart will have. When your heart becomes dying, but that's my whole thing. To the people, in 1929, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, and 40, 41 and 42, How you doing? Black people, I love black women. See me with the white woman, I'm holding for the police. I went to school for a while and then I spent. And got old enough to get married. And my first wife, I had a 1942 Buick and her. I left both of them to come to California. It hurt too bad because neither one of them was working. Moving right along. That's always a good thing. I married again. This time, and then my wife started putting on weight. From 110 to 312. 312 pounds at this very moment. Wait for me to come home so I can get sick. 312. She thinks I love her because when she gets in the bed, I roll toward her. I like to give people who are not married women advice. If you decide to marry, get an ugly woman. Then when she leaves you, you'll be happy. I like ugly women anyway, because they don't ask for too much. Because they know they ain't going nowhere. I'm not kidding you. My wife, now, she's not a beautiful woman, because she must well look at one like that. I have friends. I don't even know how she looks. Ray Charles went by my house to see my wife. He said she was ugly and brave. That's enough about my wife. We get on another subject. Some truths. Not anything that would be abstract to any religion or race of people. Because I'm something. But I want to say this about whites. Say it about white people. I want to clear it up tonight and forever. White friends, black people do not all look alike. It is you that all look alike. Bobby can say me, I'll prove it for you. Now, white friends, look all around the room. All the whites look at each other. See there? All of y'all are just white. Now look at us. All different colors, black walnut. Burnt almond. Chocolate mocha. Paper. Yellow, mellow, light, bright, and damn near white. See, a lot of whites think black people talk bad, but you fail to realize that some of the whites taught Africans English. Africans know that not this here and yonder, and goon and get it and uru. And Pablo, they didn't know nothing about that. Southern whites taught them. Why? Get that there yonder, Get that truck there, boy, and chuck it over here. Get the gas, chuck it over here. Africans say, which means chunk that trunk yourself. You realize, I guess you know it was one in the paper. A Negro tried to stick me up last night. A Negro gonna stick up a black man. Now wasn't that dumb? A Negro gonna rob Zorro. He jumped out there, he didn't have a gun, a pipe, or a brick. All he knew was
All right, we'll pause it right there. Okay. Some of you all said it was hard to hear because it was garbled. I'm not sure why you couldn't hear. We're gonna post a link here also. It's on YouTube. We'll put a little bit more at the end of the show. I want to go to this last story here. This was a story I saw back on March 30th, and I wanted to talk about it, but we kept running out of time. This is from Yahoo News, originally from thegrio.com. 1/3 of Americans watching fewer sports due to racial justice messaging. 1/3 of Americans are watching fewer sports due to racial justice messaging. So this ties into social justice, Black Lives Matter, holding police officers accountable, fighting against racism, etc. Right? So a survey results found 34.5% of respondents tuned out of sports when athletes began supporting social causes on the courts and fields. So when they started supporting social justice causes, you had 34.5% of respondents said they tuned out. Now, as long as they were shutting up and just dribbling and making white people happy, it wasn't a problem. When they started dealing with social justice issues, now it's a problem. Now, data released from a recent survey found 1/3 of Americans tuned into fewer sports broadcasting due to racial justice messaging being presented by teams and players. Now, according to a new YouGov Yahoo News poll, 34.5% of the 34.5% of the 1,606 U.S. adults interviewed said they are watching fewer sports programs. Okay, 34.5%, or a little more than 1/3, said they are watching fewer sports programs. About 11% said they now watch more as a result of political and social messaging, while 56.3% said they watch more. 56.3% said they watch about the same. Okay, 11% said they watch more as a result of political and social messaging, while 56.3% said they watch about the same amount of sports regardless of messages shared by athletes. But 34.4% said that they are watching fewer sports games. Now, the outlet reported viewership across all major sports was down in 2020. Okay, viewership in all major sports was down in 2020. The results of the survey differed by gender identity. Okay, the results of the survey differed by gender identity. The data found that men were more likely to dismiss sports due to messages against racism. Now, according to Yahoo, 37.6% of males said they watch less sports compared to 28% of females. 37.6% of males said they watched less sports compared to 28% of females. On another note, 13% of men said they watched more sports in the wake of social justice movements, as opposed to only 7% of women. Now, political party affiliation, as you probably guessed, highlighted disparities. A lot of this had to do with political party affiliation. Now, according to the outlet, about 13.7% of Democrats claimed to have watched more sports following the influx of social justice messaging, and 19% of Democrats watched less sports. 13.7% watched more sports, 19% watched less sports. For Republicans, 53% said they watched less sports in the wake of social justice movements. 53%, a little more than half, said they watched less sports in the wake of social justice movements. Now, the Yahoo News survey was conducted by YouGov between March 22nd and March 25th, okay, of 2021. Between March 22nd and March 25th of 2021. The participants were asked, how has the discussion of politics and sports on social media impacted your viewing habits, okay? How has the discussion of politics and sports on social media impacted your viewing habits? And asked to answer if they watched more sports, fewer sports, or the same, with an option to select that they are not sports fans at all. Now, ESPN conducted a similar survey in August of 2020 and found that fans generally supported teams and athletes speaking out on issues of social justice and racial equality. In an online survey of 837 people, of the 71% of fans who supported athletes speaking out, 44% indicated they strongly supported it. Okay, in an online survey of 837 people, of the 71% of fans who supported athletes speaking out, 44% indicated they strongly supported it. Half of the fans who responded to the poll said they are more likely to support teams and athletes who speak out than they were last year. Half of the fans who responded to the poll said they are more likely to support teams and athletes who speak out than they were last year. So this is looking at the 2020 poll, so more likely than they were in 2019. 20% say they are less likely to engage with those athletes and teams. Now, when analyzed by race, the ESPN survey found 76% of African American fans thought athletes should be speaking out while games are being played. 76% of African American fans in the ESPN survey said that athletes should be speaking out while games are being played, while 61% of Hispanic fans felt the same way, and only 46% of white fans felt the same way. Okay, now it's interesting when you have that disparity between African American fans and white fans. Only 46% said that white fans should be speaking out, but only 46% of white fans said athletes should be speaking out. Well, a lot of these white fans don't have a problem with the athletes pledging allegiance to the flag and, standing for the national anthem. A lot of them don't have a problem with the national anthem being played at the games. They probably don't have a problem when they have when the games support the United Way or the American Cancer Foundation or something like that. So isn't it interesting that they have a problem with speaking out for social justice, speaking out against racism, etc. Now, overall, 49% said they should speak out while not on the court or field. Now, according to ESPN, the survey conducted by Tidewatch for the platform of people 18 years old and older, quote, included a base sample of 537 interviews and an additional oversample of 300 interviews with African American fans who were then weighted into their proper proportion of the population. And you see LeBron James here with a shirt that says "Built by Black History." Now, NBA star LeBron James has been one of the most vocal modern athletes supporting causes of racial justice, and has been criticized for using his platform. However, he will not back down. As the Griot reported, the Akron, Ohio bred basketball player promised that he will never just shut up and dribble. Okay, as Laura Ingraham on Fox News so famously told him to do. Now, in February, LeBron James responded to Swedish soccer player Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who called the NBA champion's activism, quote unquote, a mistake, according to the report. LeBron James responded, "I will never shut up about things that are wrong. I will never shut up about things that are wrong." He said, "I preach about my people and I preach about equality, social injustice, racism, systematic voter suppression, things that go on in our community," LeBron James said. He went on to say, I know what's going on still, because I have a group of 300 plus kids at my school that's going through the same thing, and they need a voice, and I'm their voice. He added, quote, "I'll use my platform to continue to shed light on everything that's going on around this country and around the world. There's no way I would ever just stick to sports, because I understand how powerful this platform and my voice is." Okay. So that's a really, really good comment from LeBron James, who is a multimillionaire and really don't have to be bothered with any of this stuff. To be quite honest with you, he can just go live off in his, whatever white community he wants to, white gated community he wants to, and doesn't have to be bothered with any of this stuff. Okay, so it's really good that he's saying this. Let me put it like this. I like LeBron better as I ain't like him as an opponent for the Detroit Pistons, but I like him as a social activist. Let me put it like that. Okay, he's a better social activist than he is an opponent for the Detroit Pistons. I ain't like him when he's an opponent for the Detroit Pistons. I don't, back in the day when I used to watch the Detroit Pistons play, because I don't watch them play at all now. But back when I used to watch them, when they used to, go to the playoffs, what have you. But I don't watch any of the sports now. Definitely don't watch the Sorry Lions. Okay, so because I see some of my friends, on Facebook, they'll post about the Lions, and the Lions lost again and things like that. I'm like, why in the world are you watching the Detroit Lions game? You must like being disappointed or something, so anyway, they say, oh, you're not supposed to talk about the home team. It's like, well, if you had the sorry ass Lions, you would talk about them also. Okay. Let's see here. All right, let's post this caption here. Yeah, now I remember the Bad Boys days. I remember the Bad Boys days, but we're long away from the Bad Boys. You're dealing more like with, we're a long way away from the Bad Boys. All right. Let me take a look here and try to get a quick update on what's going on in Minneapolis here. Okay, so police dispersed crowd in third night of Daunte Wright protests. Miles away from the DerekChauvin trial, there were again protests in the Minneapolis suburb of Brooklyn Center, where an officer fatally shot Daunte Wright this weekend. Let me see something here. Just a second, bro. All right, I'm trying to get a update here. Okay, that looks like the most recent. All right, well we'll have more information on Wednesday's show. Let's see. Okay, yeah, we'll have more information on Wednesday's show. And let me look at one other thing here. Okay. All right. Okay, look, we have to get out of here. Hey, if you'd like to this type of information, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App. Also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting. We're here 6 days a week, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time. Then Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as well. I want to go back to this last clip here from Flip Wilson's show on Red Fox on Flip Wilson from February 28th, 1974.
We're going to do something that we've done before with you on the show. There are quite a few things about you to be.
I'd like to ask Red Fox if Lamar will get married during the filming of Sanford and Son.
How about Kevin?
Yeah.
My sister Red Fox. Is it you that you have a Christmas tree in your living room? Yes. Okay, Christmas every day if you want to believe it. Why do have friends just once a year? That's right. Question for both of you. Will either one of you be a candidate for office in 76? If we do, we're going to... Yes. No idea about going anywhere in 76.
I myself have never aligned myself with any political party, and politics is a completely different thing. It's politicians who start wars. I'm in the love business.
Who gave you your first big break, and is Clero your real name?
Clero is my real name, and I think that was probably my first big break because I had to try to live that down.
For both. Do you have any hobbies? Do you collect anything?
Yeah, chicks.
What's your favorite monologue?
My favorite monologue is the one that I'm going to do on my first special next year. I'm working on it. Best is yet to come.
I'd like to ask Mr. Red Fox
Fox about a record that I have that he made about jackasses, and I'd like to know if it would be a party record, and I'd like to know what year it was made and if it's a collector's item.
1956.
1956, so it's a collector's item. That's great. I got it at a swap meet.
For Red. Is Red your real name, or what is your real name? My legal name. My real name is John Elroy Sanford. When I was born, my brother's name was Fred Glenn Sanford. I played Fred Sanford on television. Took most of the family, that's where it's at.
Is it true that you're Flip Wilson's father?
My birth. I have to say that Red has always been a mother to me.
All right, so all right, so that's some classic TV right there. That is from February 28th, 1974. Okay, some of y'all weren't even born then. February 28th, 1974. And we're going to pull this up here. I did a screenshot. So they were looking sharp too. Let's pull this up here. Let's close that out. Yeah, so this is the Flip Wilson show. When Flip Wilson had his TV show, I think it was on NBC. Yeah, it was on NBC, I think it was. And then Red Fox was on Sanford and Son on NBC also at the time. And I know they used to show the Flip Wilson show on Aspire TV. I'm not sure if they still show it, but they have some clips of it on YouTube. All right, Red Fox. This is from February 28th, 1974. Red Fox, the funniest junk man in America, on the Flip Wilson show. All right, look, we have to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace.